Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum. In the podcast, where I invite my guests to come on and talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collate their fancy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. I hope everyone is doing well as this reaches your airwaves. And I must say, before we start this one, a massive thank you to the guys in LinkTree, 4 guests over 3 continents, 1 great band, and they had an amazing fancy festival. So if you've not gone back or heard episode 126, make sure you do. And if you are in the Cheltenham area on Thursday the 22nd of June, or you're in London on Friday the 23rd of June, make sure to go and see their live shows. They will be absolutely spectacular, and they've both got great support bands. So that was 126 done. It's time to introduce the guest on the 127th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And this week, I'm delighted to introduce singer, songwriter, producer, guitarist from Reverend The Makers. It's Ed Cosens.
Hello, how you doing? You all right?
I'm all good, Ed. I'm looking so forward to having you on the podcast to talk all about your music, your fantasy festival, Reverend and The Makers. But before we do, I always like to check in with my guests just to see how they're doing from like a mental health perspective. I think it's really important we talk about how we're feeling at the moment. So Ed, mate,
absolutely.
How are you, mate?
How am I, mate? I'm all right, I'm not too bad. Fair to middling, as we say up this way. It's, good days, bad days, but generally all right. Yeah, I can't really grumble too hard. It's obviously last, what we're talking now, 3 years have been tough, been difficult, obviously with the pandemic and everything that went with that as a musician and, as a performer. It's, it's been really tough, and you can't say it hasn't. But, I think, I did a lot of things actually through lockdown when the debut solo record was coming out, about kind of mental health and stuff. And I think as a creative person, it was kind of a double-edged sword, really. One side, we couldn't go out and gig, everything stopped and we lost all our incomes and everything. But on the other hand, you had this outlet to sort of talk about it and process everything. So I thought that was really kind of positive in a way. So, it is what it is. We've just got to keep pushing forwards. But yeah, at the minute, I'm not too bad, mate. I think I'm all right, I'm all right, yeah.
Lots going on in your world, so I'm looking forward to talking about it. But before we talk about present day, let me take you back to when Ed was much younger. What was like your early musical memories, and how did you first get into music?
Wow, I mean, early musical memories, I guess, I'll always remember sitting in the back of my mum and dad's car, going on sort of holidays, summer holidays and stuff. And I always remember they had in fact, they had 3 things. They had the Beatles Red compilation album on tape.
Nice.
So we always had that. I remember looking at it thinking, this is a bit mad. And, listening to the songs, I didn't know anything about it at the time. I was like, 6, 7, whatever. But I always think they were quite interesting songs. And then they had the Carpenters, Best of the Carpenters on tape. And then they had some classical thing. I can't remember what it was. It was like some Mozart clarinet thing that they always used to put on, which was. But I think it was that Beatles one that really stuck with me. I think just listening to those songs and just not knowing what they were or what it meant, but just being attracted to it, I guess. So that was kind of some of my earliest musical memories.
And at what point did you pick up the guitar? Was there an instrument before that, or did the guitar follow shortly after that one?
No, there were instruments before at primary school. So when we're talking probably year 3 or 4, I did violin. I got my grade 1 violin, which was quite a miracle, really, because I didn't like it and I never practiced. But I did that, and I shout out to my mum and dad who put up with it for probably a year, 18 months, which can't have been pleasant. So that was kind of my first musical thing. Obviously, I did a bit of recorder. I think everybody did recorder at school at some point, didn't they? So, but I didn't get into guitar till secondary school. Actually, truth be told, I'd experimented with the various sort of tennis rackets and things with my next door neighbour. We used to pretend we were like, I think, Queen at the time. The Bohemian Rhapsody was back at number 1 again, I think, when after Freddie Mercury died, and we were singing along with that and tennis rackets and stuff. But yeah, secondary school was the first time I kind of got into guitar. I had a few lessons around sort of 12, 13, and then kind of just in various little bands at school. My mate was a really good guitarist. He'd had lessons from young, so I was always a bit like in awe of him. that kind of spurred me on to learn, really. So yeah.
And obviously bands came, and then you end up in Reverend The Makers.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was an interesting path, really. I was in bands all through school, playing little gigs here and there wherever we could, and a lot of the kind of the village pub scene and all the rest of it, which was quite an education. And then, yeah, I'd kind of after university, I think I'd just sort of just finishing uni, and I was at school with John Reverend, but I hadn't really seen him for a few years, and then we randomly just kind of went for a pint one day, hooked up again, and he said, "Oh, I want to start a band," and I was just like, "Okay." Like, John had never been in bands at school; he'd never been that kid doing music, so it was always a bit like, "Okay, what's that about?" And then, yeah, we kind of just got together, wrote a couple of songs, and yeah, I was in a place where I kind of wanted to start a new thing, so off it went, and we went through various different incarnations before we got to Reverend The Makers, but yeah, ultimately that's where it led to, and all the madness that ensued following that, really.
I mean, you say madness, I mean, what, 7 albums, you've played pretty much all over the world, still releasing albums, one this year, your 7th album, and that's obviously performed really strongly, like number 6 in the album chart, so I guess the passion for Reverend must be just as strong and as enjoyable as ever.
I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a crazy one to think that it's been that long, really. It's sometimes it doesn't seem that long at all, but then other times you just think back and like, yeah, it was the beginning of it all was so long ago now. But I don't know. We always tried to kind of keep things fresh, I think, which is why it's been able to carry on so long. We've never tried to repeat ourselves if we can avoid it. We always tried to do something slightly different, and we've had a few different sort of lineup changes over the years, which has kind of kept it fresh. And yeah, it's always fun to go out and play the songs for the fans. I mean, we were lucky to, I think at the time we came out, we managed to get this really core fan base that have kind of stuck with us and grown over the years. And we still see some of the same faces we always saw at the gigs, which is really cool. And it's just been a great journey, and yeah, it seems to be going stronger than ever. So yeah, bit blessed, really.
And performing live with Reverend The Makers seems like it is big and as crazy as ever. Obviously, I saw a lot of stuff recently happen on the last tour, and you're going out again, right? So you're heading out on an acoustic tour. Yeah.
I mean, playing live has always been the best thing, really. I mean, making the albums in the studio, I love being in the studio, but there's nothing that can compare to playing live, especially sort of at a Reverend gig. It's always been a real party, and it's always been energetic, and it's just loads of fun to do. So yeah, that's been great. And then yeah, this acoustic tour in June, something slightly different. It's a little bit more. We can kind of play a few more tunes that we wouldn't normally play, I think, which is always interesting. It keeps it nice for us, And it's not quite as crazy, but I've done a few acoustic shows as Reverend, and they can get a bit leery towards the end, even the fact it's acoustic. So yeah, it should be good fun.
You've obviously done loads of gigs, Ed. Do you still get... What's the feeling before a show for you? Is it nerves? Is it excitement? How do you feel when you walk out onto a stage?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, really. I mean, I've been quite lucky, really, that I've never massively struggled with nerves as such. I've had a few gigs, particularly in the early days, where I remember being quite nervous. But even like my first ever gig, where it was like a school concert when I was like 14 or something, and I mean, I had nerves, but I didn't feel like it was overbearing or anything, And so I think I've just always had this kind of natural love for it, really. So I feel quite lucky in that respect. I still, you still get the odd bit of sort of tension, I guess, but it's more. I think it's more a nerves for things going well rather than the performance side of it. Technically, there's nothing worse than a guitar pedal going down or your amp dying or whatever, and or there's some other technical issue. That's the thing I get most nervous about, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. I just love it, And as the older I've got, I don't know. It's finding the way to kind of ramp yourself up to showtime, really, because when you're young, you just 100 miles an hour all the time, whereas you can't really be 100 miles an hour anymore. So it's just trying to sort of time your run a little bit has become a bit more interesting. But it's still just as exciting, I think, as it ever was, which I say I feel really lucky to have that.
That's a great sign. So the acoustic tour, 17 dates all in all. It starts on the 8th of June in Wrexham, finishes in Lincoln on Wednesday the 19th of July. Many previous guests of the podcast and certain support acts in that. So that's going to be an amazing tour to go to. So if you can get yourself down there, please do. But as well as Reverend The Makers, Ed, you also released a fantastic solo album, Fortunes Favour, in 2021. Yeah. Obviously, you're probably known as being the sideman in Reverend. I mean, because how did the solo album come about? Have you always been a songwriter and had your own collection of songs?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I was, when I first started learning guitar, and I dabbled with, writing sort of rudimentary songs, and so being in bands throughout school, we were always writing our own material. I can't bear to listen to any of it now, truth be told. It's it's all a learning process, isn't it? And I've always had that desire in me to write songs, and obviously I've wrote the majority of the stuff with Reverend The Makers with John, so I've always written and been a part of that. But yeah, I think, I don't know, it kind of started about sort of 10 years ago, really. I think we'd had the second Reverend record, and there was a bit of a break, and I was just thinking, well, I need to do something else here. I can't just sit on my arse, So I just started sort of trying to think about what I could do as a solo thing, or something else, or whatever it was at the time. But yeah, eventually it's through, I guess, finding a bit of confidence and a bit of clarity in what I want to do as an artist that's not Reverend, It sort of slowly fell into place, and got to the point of making Fortunes Favour, and a couple of the songs on that record were older songs from that kind of early period that I've developed, and it turned out I was really chuffed with it. I think it was a great album, and really proud of it, and moving on and making another one currently. So yeah.
I was going to ask you about the follow-up. So you have been in the studio. So I guess in terms of the follow-up, is there like an expected date on it yet? Or is it just recording and see how that goes, and whenever it comes, it comes?
We're just mixing the record at the moment. So it's all recorded. So we're mixing it. I'm hoping, not committing to this, but I'm hoping to put something new out this year. And then the album will probably be next spring as an album release. But yeah, hopefully we'll start releasing some new material back end of this year if I can. I think it's just been another interesting process to go through, following on from the first one and trying to sort of find out what I'm trying to say now, really. And talking, interesting, you said at the beginning of the podcast about the mental health thing. I think there's definitely an undercurrent of that on this record, and sort of dealing with lots of different sort of issues and things. So yeah, it's been a really interesting process, I think.
I look forward to hearing the new one when it comes out, Ed. So as well as playing with Reverend, you have got some shows coming up as a solo artist. You've got 6 shows, solo tour. Starts on Saturday the 3rd of June in the Gorilla Beer Hall in Mexborough, and it finishes on Saturday the 17th of June in Mill Hill Chapel in Leeds. I mean, how much are you looking forward to taking those songs out on the road as a solo act?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I've done a few little solo things over the last couple of years. I did some gigs last January, just gone, that were great, and so, some of those are the first time I've done headline shows outside of Sheffield, really. And these gigs coming up in June again, they're all outside Sheffield, and it's the first time I've done kind of headline shows in all those places. Go to Manchester and Nottingham and York and all these places. So it's really kind of, it's a really interesting process, and kind of stepping out on my own. It's almost like starting again. It's felt kind of really kind of new again, and trying to connect with those audiences in a slightly different way. But yeah, I love it. It's just a different experience, and obviously singing, being that kind of focal point, is something I've kind of had to learn to do again. I did it when I was much younger, but not since obviously Reverend days. So yeah, trying to learn to be that kind of confident kind of front performer again. It's been an interesting thing to kind of deal with and get my head around. But I think it's all in a good place now. And yeah, I love, obviously the songs mean a lot to me, and to be able to play them to people, and the reaction I seem to be getting from people when I do play, and it's really encouraging, and it's a lovely thing to be able to do, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a fantastic album. I must commend you on it as well. I guess people can see you in Reverend and go, right, his solo album will sound like this, but it doesn't sound necessarily how you think it will sound. It's quite a different sound, but a great sound nonetheless. So I guess as a solo act, I think that must be quite gratifying for you to kind of be proving, I guess, a few people wrong who might think you might be a one-trick pony.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's obviously it's not the aim to set out to prove people wrong. It was, very much just for myself more than anything. But I guess, yeah. I mean, there's always been a thing even with Reverend that we've not been written off as such, but we've always been sort of lumped together with this kind of, I don't know. There was a kind of an image of this kind of lad band thing that was back in the kind of noughties and stuff, and it was all kind of fairly lazy journalism, really, I think, on a lot of people's parts, that we got lumped in with this, and we've never really been given a really fair crack at it, I don't think, in some respects. So there's always been a bit of that, and having to come out and prove ourselves. So I guess there is a bit of that with the solo thing, really, just, to be able to showcase, what I can do and tell my kind of stories and get my thoughts and feelings across to people. And as I said, people seem to be connecting with that, and some of the things I sing about and seem to definitely be resonating with people. So it's really, really kind of gratifying in that respect.
That's brilliant. And you can be found on social media, right? So if anyone's listening and thinking, where can I find info? People can find info. You're on Twitter and you're on Facebook, and you have a LinkTree site, which is your website. So various places to go around, Ed. So your Twitter handle's just Ed Cosens.
Yeah, so Instagram, Twitter's Ed Cosens, Facebook Ed Cosens Music, and then if you get edcosens.com, if you head to that, that's my Linktree, and all the ticket links are on there for all the gigs and to listen to the music and all sorts of things, merchandise, all the rest of it. It's all on there.
Fantastic. So without giving away any spoilers in regards to your fantasy festival, Ed, music-wise, you mentioned the Beatles and the Carpenters earlier as your early musical memories, but what music are you actually into?
That's a very good question. I often think about that myself on a daily basis. What is it? I don't know. I've always had quite an eclectic kind of taste, really. I mean, yeah, those early things. I mean, the Beatles are a bit of a given. I think that they run throughout everything. As far as I'm concerned, it's they're ever present in whatever kind of music you're thinking about listening to and working on. But when I was at school, I dabbled with a bit of sort of. I remember getting in. There was a pirate radio station in Sheffield in the kind of early 90s that was playing like all the kind of early jungle stuff and things like that. And that I got a bit mad on that for a bit. And I love reggae, Bob Marley and everybody, and obviously the whole indie thing in the noughties. I love a bit of kind of. Well, yeah, I'm not giving anything away, but there's all sorts of things, really. It's I couldn't ever say I was, apart from being an indie kid, I guess, in the 90s with the whole Britpop thing. I don't think I've ever been like part of a scene of music or felt like I've been in one camp. You know what I mean? It's but I think that's also from Sheffield as well. Sheffield's a very kind of eclectic place musically. There's been so much going on here over the years that's just vastly different. You walk down an old industrial road and there's practice rooms and every single one's doing something different. There's never been one kind of thing. So I guess that's probably rubbed off on kind of my musical listening over the years.
And what are you listening to at the moment, Ed? What's on your speakers, whether that's a new act or an old act? Anything you're listening to at the moment? I
have been listening to a lot of First Aid Kit. I think they're absolutely brilliant. And I think who else is there? There's some Sharon Van Etten. I've been listening to her a lot. I think that's really cool. I'll tell you what I've got into a lot recently. I've never really listened to him much, but I've always heard a lot about him. That's Nick Drake. I've sort of found a bit of a love for Nick Drake recently, which surprises me because listening to it now, I'm surprised I've not been into him before, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I've been having a lot of kind of Nick Drake kind of stuff. So yeah, stuff like that really.
Great stuff. I love a bit of First Aid Kit. Great band. And when you find them, you really get into them, and their harmonies are fantastic. The vibe they've got is fantastic. And yeah, absolutely unbelievable. So let me take you back, Ed. Do you remember buying your first record and what that was?
Yes, I do. So my eldest sister, who is 5 years older than me, she was a member, I don't know if you remember this, of Britannia Music Club. Do you remember Britannia Music
You used to get
Club?
the booklets and they used to post them out.
You used to get the booklet and you choose your CDs and then you send off for them. And yeah. They did they used to send you, when you first joined, they used to send you like 6 CDs free. And I remember I badgered it, and I don't quite know why, because I mean, I was only like, must have only been sort of 11 or 12 at the time, but I got her to get me. There were 2 things quite randomly different. One was Blood Sugar Sex Magic by Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the second one was Steam by E17. I'm not quite sure how those 2 go together, but so they were my first albums, I guess. But I remember buying I'm a Believer by EMF and Vic and Bob on single cassette. I remember that. That was a bit of a random one. And I think, what else did I get? Bad, Michael Jackson. That was one of the first. That was the first one I actually bought with my own physical cash in a shop. So, yeah.
Amazing. I guess out of E17 and Red Hot Chili Peppers, I'm pretty sure you've supported one of those acts, right? And you can say you've supported the one who you would be more proud to support, I guess.
Well, I mean, that was a crazy thing in itself. You know, getting asked to support Red Hot Chili Peppers, getting asked to support them. In fact, we did a couple. We supported them at Hampden Park in Glasgow, but we did Nebworth with them as well, which was just a crazy thing. You know, we were the opening act, so we were on early doors. You know, but even so, because it's so vast, like you open up at an academy gig and there's maybe 100, 200 people there, but this was like, even at the beginning, there was like 30, 40,000 people there. You know, it's just, the numbers were just insane, and just to be able to do that and to be asked to do it, you know, they asked us to do it, which was amazing. So yeah, that was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Where's the biggest place you've ever played? Obviously, I know you've done like the Glastonburys and the Nebworths. Is there like somewhere in South America where you're going to tell me you played to like 500,000 people going mental or something?
Sadly not. No, do you know what? We've never actually played in South America. It's one of the places we've not been able to tick off, which is a shame. It's probably that Nebworth gig. To be honest, it's the biggest sort of site we've ever done. Obviously, that was as a support act. I'm trying to think as a headline. We headlined at the Roundhouse in London. That was one of the bigger gigs we've done as a headline. So yeah, but we've kind of done them all. We've been lucky enough that we've supported loads of people. So we've done like Oasis and Noel Gallagher and Kasabian and you know, the Chili Peppers. So we've done all the kind of arenas and stadiums and stuff. You know, it's pretty mad really to think back. But it all seems like a bit of a dream now. But
yeah, I bet it does. And in terms of kind of festivals, are you a big fan of the festival? Do you like them or?
Absolutely, yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's definitely. I think you know, obviously doing Glastonbury and stuff in the early days, that was amazing to be able to just fully go and commit to that. You know, obviously pre-kids and everything. It's a slightly different thing now. Although we have done a couple of festivals with the kids, which is great. You know, that you see things through a whole kind of new, obviously, set of eyes with the kids, and you experience it in a completely different way, which is great. And I think Glastonbury's, you know, at some point we'll definitely try and take the kids down there, because I think there's so much to do at Glastonbury, despite not even listening to music, you know, for the kids and stuff. And you know, my eldest, he's really into music. He loves his music. So yeah, we'll definitely do some festivals with them. But it's just a great thing, you know, for the ticket price. I know like Glastonbury's obviously really expensive now, but the majority of festivals, you know, for the money you're paying and the amount of bands you get to see and the experiences that you have, it's amazing really that you can do stuff like that. You know, I think it's brilliant.
You said your youngest was starting to get into music. Has he turned you on to anything that hadn't hit your radar yet? So, for example, my 10-year-old got me into Lizzo, who I would never have listened to previously, but we ended up buying the Lizzo album, and now I love Lizzo. She's like amazing. Has that happened for you yet? As your kids?
Yeah, do you know what it has? I think he must have just heard a song on the radio once and just loved it, and we started this little playlist on Spotify for him of his favourite songs. And this one artist just stood out above all. He just couldn't listen to her enough, and it was Sigrid. Sigrid from Norway, and he just absolutely loves it. And the more he's listened to it, and then we've listened to her first record. She's just had a second record out last year, and it's brilliant. We absolutely love it. And she's a fantastic songwriter, and you know, does it all herself, and she's really kind of really down to earth and just like a great singer, great performer. So yeah, we absolutely love it, and you know, we just put it on because we like it now. You know, it's not just his thing anymore. She played at Tramlines here in Sheffield last year, So we managed to take him to see her. So we went to watch her there and everything. And yeah, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, it's funny that the things they're cotton onto, kids, musically. I mean, he listens to a lot of rubbish, don't get me wrong, but there's some things he'll just hear and you just think, wow, I'd have never picked up on that, but now I've listened to it. It's really cool. So it's interesting how they get a different perspective on things.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So you've obviously spoken a lot about playing live. Do you have a favourite gig? And that can be as a performer or as a fan. Is there like a gig or two that stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, as a performer, there was one gig. It must have been probably 2014, 15, something like that. We played at the Ritz in Manchester, and I mean, it's a great venue. Beautiful place. There's the sprung dance floor and everything. So when everyone's bouncing, they seem like they're bouncing twice as high. It's a great venue. But it was one of those gigs where very rarely would we all come off stage, like the five of us in the band and the front of house sound engineer and the monitor guy and everybody. Very rarely do we all come off stage and say that was an amazing gig. That couldn't have gone any better. It's super rare. And I remember that one gig, everybody just came off and we were all just absolutely flying. It was such a good gig. And I don't know why. I don't know what was different about it. I mean, the venue was great. It was sold out, all the rest of it. But there was just something about that. And then just randomly how you get certain nights like that where things just come together and it takes you on literally onto another level. It's a bit crazy, really, but I don't know. As a watcher, I'm not entirely sure what my favourite gig would be. Really, talking about Glastonbury, I saw Stevie Wonder at Glastonbury. That was pretty cool. That was pretty special. Yeah, so something like that, I guess.
Yeah, he's got some catalogue, hasn't he, Stevie Wonder? He's just got the few hits. So, like I said at the top of the pod, this is all about getting our guests to collate their fantasy festival. So Ed gets to choose any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full, and Ed gets to pick an encore which all of his 5 acts can perform together at the end of his fantasy festival. So for any first time listeners, very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So I mentioned Electricity. So I had Alex, Ali, Nigel and Steve in the last episode. They created their Coffee in the Garden fantasy festival. So they had a workaround on Tea in the Park, and I told a story about how when they went to Tea in the Park, the generator failed and they never played Tea in the Park. So they were going off to create Coffee in the Garden. For their opening act, they picked Root Juice. For their Super Seconds act, they picked Orange, both bands from the 90s. Midway Madness, they picked Mr. Thomas Hughes and had the Lucky Bishops play as well. Pre-headline act, they picked Dodgy. And for the headline act, because there were 4 of them, I let them cheat and pick 2. And I had Rage Against the Machine, but had Jeff Buckley performing with them as well. So a bit of a cheating lineup there. And for their encore, they had all 5 of their acts play Judy Over the Rainbow, which was a track by Orange back in the day. So very easy format of the show. But before we talk about your acts, Ed, you got to give your fantasy festival a name, and we have to give it a venue as well. So what are you going to call your fantasy festival, Ed?
Well, I've undernod about this. I'm no good at naming things traditionally, so I've opted for a bit of a cheesy pun. I'm just going to call it Eddie Steady Go.
I like it. I love it, actually. Eddie Steady, Eddie Steady Go. And you can take us anywhere in the world for Eddie Steady Go. So obviously Sheffield, there's 2 massive stadiums. I'm sure you've got an allegiance to one over the other. You can take us anywhere in the UK, anywhere that you want to take us, Ed. Where would you like to hold Eddie Steady Go?
Well, I mean, I was kind of thinking a little bit bigger than that, really. I was thinking, do you know what it'd be? It's about time that sort of the world got its act together and put all their money together and got a big rocket ship and went off and the first festival on the moon. What do you reckon?
Oh, I love it. All right, we're going to hold it on the moon.
You've got to think big. You've got to aim high, haven't you? So why not?
Absolutely. If you don't think big, then who is, right? So we're going to the moon for Eddie Steady Go. I mentioned footy. I know John tweeted the other day about Sheffield Wednesday. Are you Sheffield Wednesday as well?
I don't want to talk about it though.
Okay. Well, I'll see you next season probably, because I'm Leyton Orient fan and we just won League 2. So I look forward to hopefully I won't see you at Hillsborough, but I think I probably will, given the
Listen, barring an absolute miracle on the day. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but that's why we love it, Ed, though. That's why we love it. Stranger things are happening on the football pitch. Not many, but stranger things though, mate. So before we talk about your 5 acts, are there any acts you want to mention who you love but just aren't coming with us on our rocket ship to the moon for Eddie Steady Go?
Yeah, so I've got a couple actually. I mean, I've got a little bit of a kind of certainly the first half of the festival, there's a bit of a theme going on in terms of like their kind of duos. So a couple of the acts that unfortunately didn't make the cut. There's Simon Garfunkel would have been great, but unfortunately they didn't get a ticket. And then also another duo. I don't know if you've heard of them, called the Lost Brothers from Ireland. They're just a couple of guys. And they do kind of sort of folky, bluesy, folky kind of stuff, and they're just one of those. It's a bit like Simon Garfunkel, but the harmonies are just beautiful, and the songs they write are just really beautiful and lovely. And I've been a big fan of them for a long time. So yeah, you should check them out. Lost Brothers, they're called. So yeah, sadly they didn't make it though.
I look forward to listening to them. It sounds really cool. Simon and Garfunkel, never been picked for a fantasy festival after all this time. I guess, there's some conceptions that I had when I started this podcast that certain acts would get chosen. Simon and Garfunkel still waiting to get called up after 127.
Well, they're on the reserve list anyway.
On the reserve list. All right, if the rocket fails and we go down and we have to go back, maybe they'll come with us. So 2 o'clock in, we're all on the moon. Eddie Steady Go is ready to start. So Ed, who are you going to have opening Eddie Steady Go?
So yeah, sticking with the duo theme, possibly, arguably the best duo there's ever been. The Everly Brothers are going to open my festival. Just amazing songs. Again, the harmonies, possibly the best harmonies of all between two people. Obviously, the fact they're brothers, I think, helps with that a little bit. A lot of people have talked about that. But yeah, I think, nice, gentle, kind of beautiful, melodic way to ease our way in.
Great shout, and some very well-known songs as well that everyone can sing along to and enjoy. And not an obvious choice, which is fantastic as well. I guess it might not surprise you, it might do. First time the Everly Brothers have been picked for a fantasy festival appearance. So they're making their Fantastival debut at Eddie Steady Go. So they're going to open the festival, play from 2 till 3 in your opening act. We're going to take a half-hour break. Then it will be 3:30. It'll be time for your Super Seconds act. So Ed, who's going to be your Super Seconds act?
Super Seconds, so well, we've already mentioned them briefly, but again, continuing with that kind of easing away and nice melodic duo. It's when our first aid kit play. I think they're just wonderful. Again, the harmonies and the songs, and I just like that, especially if you're on the moon. We're going to ramp it up a little bit later on, but I think for now it's just you want to be taking in the whole vibe, don't you, and just floating around listening to floaty melodies, and it all kind of, I think it works at that point. Middle of the afternoon is about right, I think, on the moon.
Yeah, I mean, they're a great act. I mean, I never heard of them until about a couple of years ago, and they played Glastonbury and were on for like one song, and I was like, who are these? And I just thought they were like American. Obviously they're 2 Swedish sisters who sound like they're from Nashville. So amazing act, very countrified, great vocals and harmonies, like you said, Ed. So they're making their second Fantastival appearance. They're going to play from 3:30 till 4:30. We'll take another half-hour break. That'll take us to 5 o'clock, and it'll be time for your Midway Madness act. So Ed, who's going to give us our madness at the midway point?
Okay, so I kind of ran with the Midway Madness title a bit literally, and from a very kind of nice, easy kind of start, we're just going to hit people around the heads now. I think it's time to see how high you can bounce on the moon, and I've invited AC/DC to play and do a set. They're a bit of a long-term guilty pleasure of mine. I say guilty pleasure, that's probably not fair because they are very good, but I think they're often seen as a little bit kind of, I don't know, cheesy kind of rock, but they're much more than that for me. I think they're amazing. I love them, and just every time I listen to it, I can't help but smile and just get involved. So I'll kick things off proper with AC/DC.
That's a great shout. Maybe surprisingly, only the third time AC/DC have been picked, and obviously they've got a wealth of songs to play. You're only giving them an hour, Ed. So what are you going to tell them that is going on the set? Is there anything that has to go on the set list for you?
Well, I'm very much an early period AC/DC fan, so the Bon Scott era. So basically, as long as they play everything from that era, and a few of the kind of Back in Black, obviously, and a couple of the hits after that. I used to love they had an album in the 90s called Ball Breaker, which I used to really like. So maybe a couple of tracks off that as well, but mainly early periods was where my head's at with that.
Great shout. I mean, I've only seen AC/DC once, and I went begrudgingly because it was when Axl Rose was doing the vocal at the Olympic Stadium, and I really was like, I don't want to go. And my best mate ended up getting me a ticket for Christmas, I think, because he wanted to go. I was like, okay, I'll come. And you know what? It was outstanding. It was so good. It was so loud. And normally with acts like that, there's only like one or two slow songs where they slow it down. With AC/DC, it just got faster and progressively and louder and louder. And by the end, you were just like, but amazing.
Yeah. It's proper old school rock and roll, the stage show, the props and everything, and it's a bit silly and it's a bit of fun, but it's it's proper old school, isn't it? So you've got to tip your hat.
Absolutely. So they are going to come. They're going to rock us on the moon for an hour. Going to play from 5 till 6. We're going to take one more half-hour break, and then we'll have 2 acts left to go. So Ed, your pre-headline act gets to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So Ed, who's going to be your pre-headline act?
Okay, so I'm thinking everyone's just had their head blown off by AC/DC, so we need just to come down a little bit before the headliner. And I've also picked this next act to be the one to play the album in full, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
So I've opted for Mr. Sheffield himself, Richard Hawley, is gonna be the pre-headliner, and I'd like him, amongst his greatest hits, I'd like him to play the album Low Edges in full, which I believe was his second record, was it his third? It might be his third record. So yeah, it's just one of my all-time favourite records. It's just there's not a song on it that had a no skip album. It's one of them. It's just beautiful. And I've covered a couple of the songs off that record myself, and I love listening to it. I love playing it, and it's really, really cool.
I guess obviously Sheffield is probably a bigger place than what I've ever been to Sheffield. Do you know Richard? Like, have you met him and told him how much?
I do know Richard pretty well. Yes, I've met him a number of times. We've hung out a little bit. He's every bit as lovely as you can imagine. He's just a really caring and giving fella, really, and he's got a lot of time for all musicians. And he's now sort of, I guess, one of the elder statesmen of Sheffield music now. But he's always got the time for you. He'll always pick up the phone if you call him or whatever. And he's just a fantastic songwriter. He's had a pretty sort of crazy mad life, really. A lot of really interesting. If you ever get a chance to sort of read about him or whatever and stuff he's done, it's crazy. He's done records with Nancy Sinatra and Dwayne Eddy and all sorts of people, and he's just a top guy. So definitely pleased to have him playing and playing that album. It'd be wonderful.
Amazing. So Richard Hawley, I guess surprisingly again, makes his first Fantasy Festival appearance. So Richard Hawley gets on the Fantastival roster. He's going to play Low Edges in full, and that'll take us through to 8 o'clock. We'll take one more break on the moon, and then that will take us to 8:30, and it'll be time for your headline act, Ed. So your first 4 acts, all superb, but who's going to headline Eddie Steady Go?
Right. So the one band, I mean, I was lucky enough to see the main guy from these a few years ago play, but I've never seen him play with the band he's most famous for playing with. And there was a particular gig they did in the 80s that it was the one gig I would always wish I was at. And the band is Talking Heads, and they did a gig I think it was 1984, and they filmed it. It was a film called Stop Making Sense, and it's just the most fantastic live gig you'll ever see. The way they craft the set and the show, starts with basically a completely bare stage. There's nothing on it, and David Byrne, the singer, walks out with a little old 80s boombox and acoustic guitar and just starts playing. I think he plays Psycho Killer on his own, and then slowly the band throughout the next few songs all come on, and it just builds, and it's an amazing live show. So I'd have Talking Heads headlining, playing all the hits, but particularly playing a lot of the stuff from that particular concert, Stop Making Sense. I just think, the one thing, and I was lucky enough to see David Byrne a few years ago when he was doing his American Utopia tour, and it was equally stunning and wonderful. So, just one of my favourite all-time bands.
Brilliant. I think that concert film has been mentioned a few times before on the podcast. We had Dale on, who's a Scottish singer-songwriter, and he said he went to see that film in the cinema, and basically you could stand up and sing along, and he was like, it's one of the best kind of interactive experiences he's had, because everyone was just up and singing and going crazy, like as if they were at the concert and stuff. So
Amazing, just amazing. Yeah, I think David Byrne's just an absolute kind of, genius is banded around a bit much, isn't it, often? But he really is, creatively, he's just second to none. Stylistically and visually and everything, he's just brilliant. And yeah, the music speaks for itself, really, as well.
Yeah, it certainly does. So Talking Heads make their 4th Fantasy Festival appearance. They're going to be your headline act. They're going to give us 2.5 amazing hours. And then at 11 o'clock, they're going to bring back on stage Richard Hawley, AC/DC, First Aid Kit, and the Everly Brothers. And you're there at the head, and they're all looking at you saying, right, Ed, what song do you want us to play? We're here to play whatever you want us to play. So, Ed, what song are you going to have your collective Fantasy Festival lineup play for your encore?
Well, I've been a little bit cheeky with this. It's kind of technically one song, although it's not just one song. There's a collection of ideas. What I'd like them to do is basically play as an encore the whole medley section from side 2 of Abbey Road in its entirety. Which I think, given it's Talking Heads, Richard Hawley, AC/DC, First Aid Kit and everybody, I think they've got all bases covered and it could be quite interesting. There's some harmonies, there's some soft moments, there's some heavy moments, there's some funky moments, I think it'll work pretty well. And they can each take a bit,
Amazing. I've got VAR from the podcast in my ears. They say it's fine. They've allowed it. There was a bit of debate in the background, but they've passed it. So that's going to be your...
it's one continuous thing, it keeps going, it never stops. It's one section.
Yeah, the Fantastival Gods. The Fantastival Gods are in your favour there. So that is it. That is signed, sealed, and delivered. So let's lock in your Fantasy Festival. You can still change your mind up to the point where it gets locked in. So let's lock it in. So we've got Eddie Steady Go, which is going to take place on the moon. So our first intergalactic Fantasy Festival. I love that.
Got to start somewhere, haven't you?
Absolutely. Opening act, we've got the Everly Brothers. Super Seconds got First Aid Kit. Midway Man has got AC/DC. Pre-headline act, we've got Richard Hawley playing his album Low Edges, and for your headline act we've got Talking Heads, and for the encore they're all going to play the side 2 medley from Abbey Road. Sounds like a fantastic Fantasy Festival to me. Happy with that one, Ed?
I'm very happy. I mean, can we make it happen? Is it a thing? Is it possible, do you think? Are we
never say never. All we need now is Sheffield Wednesday 5, Peterborough 0, and that happens, we'll book our ticket to the moon.
Tell you what, if Wednesday beat Peterborough 5 on Thursday, I am going to start booking these acts. I'm going to make it my mission to do it.
I'm going to hold you to that. You're going to get a message from me. You'll be on the pitch at Hillsborough going crazy, and you'll get a message from me going, "Oh, this guy again. Calm down." So, Ed, before we wrap up then, obviously, we've spoken about kind of tours coming up. We've spoken about this follow-up album. I mean, obviously, you never know what the future holds, but what the next couple of, what do you foresee for the rest of 2023 or 2024 going on for you?
Well, yeah, so obviously a gig's coming up, and then I just want to get this new solo record done and signed off, and I say hopefully releasing stuff this year, going into next year with a new album, and more gigs and festivals and stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it's a bit of a crazy one. I've always been a little bit kind of nervous about starting the next project in a way. It's even with the Reverend stuff. You get an album done and it comes out and it does what it does, and then you kind of feel happy with that, and then you suddenly get this feeling of I've got to do it again now. I've got to do another one. So it's slight kind of nervousness, but I've got a couple of seeds fermenting of ideas that I might do next. Which may or may not be Reverend or a solo thing. It might be something else. I don't know yet. So, but I'll always keep on with the solo thing anyway, so that's kind of a bit of a given. And then obviously the Reverend thing kind of takes care of itself, really. So yeah, just more music, more gigs, and just hope I can keep doing it. Really, I kind of feel like I've been bluffing my way through it for 15 odd years, so I'm still trying, but yeah. Long may it continue. I
reckon you'll be all right there, Ed. So like we said, Reverend The Makers go on their acoustic tour and have just released their fantastic new album, which I've actually got in front of me, funny enough. No, don't record it anyway, but Heatwave in the Cold North, which is a fantastic album. They go on their acoustic tour. And you do your solo tour as well. So both Reverend and yourself can be found on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You've got a Bandcamp page as well, Ed, right? I was looking at earlier.
Yes, there is a Bandcamp. There's not a huge amount on it, truth be told, but yes, it's there.
Yeah. So go and give that a visit. Well worth a visit then. So that is it, everyone. Thank you for listening to the 127th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. If you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe. You can review the podcast on iTunes, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can rate the show, or you can even comment against the episode now on Spotify. So please remember to do that. As I've said, Reverend and The Makers are on socials. So is Ed. So is the Fantastival Podcast. So if you're on Twitter, give us a follow at FantastivalP, or if you're not, give us an email at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. On this podcast, we don't play music, but we do get playlists. So Ed, I'll get some tracks from you. We'll make a nice little Spotify playlist of your chosen acts. We'll put on some tracks from the Lost Brothers as well, because that sounded like a really interesting group as well. Yeah. And that'll be in your episode description. So just scroll down on the episode on whatever format you're listening on and go and hit that link after listening to this episode. So Ed, you've been my 127th guest on the podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you, mate. How have you found it?
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Yeah, lucky 127, eh? There we go. Yeah, it's been great. I mean, just thinking about the kind of festival line, it was quite interesting, really, and who to put on and who not to put on, and because I could have gone. Obviously, I could have chosen like the Beatles and stuff like that, but I thought, I'm not gonna go there. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with it. I think it flows quite nicely. It's got some ups and downs, and yeah.
It's a great lineup. When you started your intro to your headline act, and you said you'd seen this solo act, but you hadn't seen the band, I thought, he's talking about McCartney here. And I was just waiting to say the Beatles. But so when you said David Byrne, I was like, okay, nice little twist there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying. Yeah, do you know what? I did see McCartney once on. I think he did a tour in kind of like 2005 or something like that. Back in the World, I think it was called. I went to see him at Sheffield Arena for that. So I've seen McCartney, which was fantastic. And yeah, sadly, obviously, would never be able to see the Beatles. But do you know what? The whole there was that Get Back documentary, wasn't there? Which I just, I thought that was wonderful, just being able to sit in the room with them guys and watch what they did. And I could have watched it for, 10 times more than that. I just thought it was fantastic. Just witnessing that kind of, just the creation of what they were doing was brilliant.
Yeah, phenomenal, especially when you see McCartney trying to riff Get Back, and you can see where he's trying to get to, and then they all kind of, at points, it catches their ear, and they're all going for it. Amazing, kind of be a fly on the wall almost at that point.
Well, and to have that footage as well is incredible. It's just amazing. That kind of thing. It's brilliant.
I must say, before we end is there any footage like that floating around of Reverend? Of like the story from the beginning? Obviously social media nowadays is massive, but obviously when you guys started, it wasn't that. Social media wasn't as big as what it is now. Is there loads of stuff? Like if there's any hardcore Reverend fans listening to this, I'm sure there are. Is there like archived footage somewhere one day that might see the light day?
There are bits and bobs, yeah. I saw something fairly recently that was really old, like predating kind of even sort of state of things, the first record, which was really interesting. But yeah, we were lucky. There were a couple of guys who used to follow us around in them early days. There was one guy, big shout out to a guy called Mark Bull. We used to call him the Sheriff because he always had the Sheriff badge on his lapel. He just filmed and took photos everywhere, and he ended up going off and documenting most of the early Arctic Monkeys stuff as well. So yeah, the Arctic Monkeys fans will have heard of Mark, and he was just around all the time, and so it was great to have something like that to capture all that stuff in, as you say, pre kind of social media days, where it could otherwise have all been lost. So yeah, we were really lucky in that respect. So there are some nuggets, and maybe one day they'll all see the light of day, but not just yet.
That's a great way to end it, to leave everyone hanging. So Ed, good luck with the tour. Good luck with both of the Reverend The Makers and the solo, and I look forward to seeing or hearing your new album when it finally comes out. So that is this podcast done. I'll be back in 2 weeks with episode number 128. It's a bank holiday the forthcoming Monday, so there's no podcast, but we'll be back in 2 weeks. So please make sure to join us. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word, and that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.